biomarkers are very specific characteristics, or I would say unique characteristics of cancer cells that give cancer cells the ability to grow, the ability to escape the immune system. And through targeted therapies, we have the ability to block these biomarkers, making sure that we block the growth of cancer cells.
Welcome to Science with a Twist, a podcast for curious people who enjoy exploring how science impacts our daily lives. From technology that helps the fight against COVID-19 to solutions that help clean the water we drink, it's all thanks to science. In each episode, members of Thermo Fisher's scientific team talk to experts who are on the cutting edge of redefining how we exist. Let's get started.
Very good. Hello, and welcome back to Science with a Twist, brought to you by Thermo Fisher Scientific, the world leader in serving science. I'm Jeff Smith, Global Lead for Precision Medicine Initiatives in the Clinical Sequencing Division at Thermo Fisher Scientific, and I'll be your host for today's episode. As part of our cancer mini-series, we've been fortunate to host Professor Deb Kelly from Penn State, who shared how her lab is using an innovative freezing technology to advance research on breast cancer. We also welcome Dr. Jeffrey Scott, the Chief Medical Officer at Integra Connect, to discuss how we can embrace precision medicine to accelerate value-based care. Today, we're closing out the series with a patient advocacy organization called LUNGevity, the nation's leading lung cancer-focused nonprofit that is dedicated to changing outcomes for patients with lung cancer through research, education, and patient support. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Basu Roy, Executive Director of Research for LUNGevity, to talk about some of their recent programs to support emerging research in lung cancer and their work to empower patients to be active decision makers in their treatment process through their No One Missed campaign. Welcome, Dr. Roy. I'm really excited to have you as our guest today, following some of the important work we collaborated on around Lung Cancer Awareness Month in November. To start, can you tell us a little more about LUNGevity and your focus within the organization?
First of all, Jeff, thank you so much for having me on Science with a Twist. So my name is Upal Basu Roy, and I'm the Executive Director of Research at LUNGevity Foundation. We are a lung cancer patient advocacy crew based in the United States, but I like to say that we have a global footprint because lung cancer is a global disease, and we've expanded our work for the global community. So as a foundation, we have two very, very simple goals. One is to improve how people live with the disease, people diagnosed with lung cancer and their caregivers. Now, this includes the traditional patient advocacy offerings, right? Survivorship, support groups, then our community building efforts, our walks and our events. Now, the second, again, relatively simple goal for the foundation is to improve outcomes of those diagnosed with lung cancer. And this is essentially our multi-year, multi-stakeholder programs. Now, my role at the foundation as the Executive Director of Research is managing two pillars under this bucket: our Translational Science Research Program, which are the research grants that we give out to other organizations to conduct research in lung cancer, and managing our Patient-Focused Research Center, which is our in-house data generation facility through which we're able to run studies with patients, caregivers, and pretty much anyone in the lung cancer ecosystem. And we publish and present this work. And through our Patient-Focused Research Center, we conduct studies to understand unmet needs of the patient community, unmet needs in the policy space, so we are able to develop better programs and better services to serve the lung cancer community. Now, nested within this bucket of improving outcomes is, again, our multi-stakeholder initiatives, our clinical trial transformation work, our precision medicine work, and our lung cancer screening work. And when I say multi-stakeholder, we pretty much work with anyone in the lung cancer ecosystem, including the FDA and other regulators, clinicians and other healthcare providers, payers, policymakers, and of course, partners such as yourself.
This is fantastic work. Thank you so much, Dr. Roy, for that background. LUNGevity is really supporting some inspiring new programs. And here at Thermo Fisher Scientific, we also share the mission of supporting emerging research through our Oncomine Clinical Research Grant Program. And our collaboration with LUNGevity on the Health Equity and Inclusiveness Research Awards has really been quite gratifying. Why is supporting researchers earlier in their careers and across diverse communities so important for your work?
Thanks, Jeff, for that very, very important question. And One of the things that I forgot to mention when I was introducing myself is I trained as a researcher as well. So my background is in cancer research, in which I received my graduate training. And one of the things that's always been sort of a part of the journey of an academic as a junior researcher is figuring out getting funding. And as the director of LUNGevity's research program, we are committed to funding the best science as well as the best people. And that's where junior researchers come in. And we are very committed to supporting workforce development in thoracic oncology because we firmly believe that we need to have a pipeline of researchers who are committed to investigating and researching complex problems in lung cancer. Now, a very important component of our workforce development awards is our Health Equity and Inclusiveness Research Awards. Now, these awards were very deliberately and strategically set up to foster careers of underrepresented minority scientists in thoracic oncology. Now, why were these awards set up? Very, very fundamentally speaking, we know that the United States is a very, very diverse nation. As we speak, the population is very diverse, and we have about 12% African Americans in the population, about 18% who identify as Hispanic Latinx, and 3% of the population who identify as American Indians and Alaskan Natives. But is that diversity reflected in the oncology workforce? Absolutely not. So we have a problem, right? So if you look at the latest statistics from the ASCO Workforce Report in 2022, only 5% of oncologists identify as Hispanic Latinx, 3% is Black or African American, and 0.1% as American Indian and Alaskan Native. So we have this mismatch, right? The population is very diverse, but the workforce is not diverse. So keeping that in mind, we created the Health Equity and Inclusiveness Research Awards specifically to foster minority scientists. Now you can ask me, why is that important, right? It is fundamentally important to have clinicians who look like patients because there's very, very good research that's shown that patients have better outcomes when they are treated by doctors who look like them, and patients are way more inclined to participate in clinical trials when those trials are being offered to them by clinicians who look like them. So this is LUNGevity's strategic investment in the future, because as the United States becomes more and more diverse, we as a patient advocacy group, we as a community, we need to be primed to serve the needs of this diverse population. Now, complementary to our Health Equity and Inclusiveness Research Awards is a new recent initiative that we launched last month during Lung Cancer Awareness Month, and that's our Minority Mentorship and Training Program. And that's complementing our Health Equity and Inclusiveness Research Awards. Now, what is this program? So this is a program that we developed at the foundation based on extensive interviews that we did with minority investigators who were junior, senior leaders in the space, faculty members, to sort of really understand, is funding sufficient or do we need something else? And we unanimously heard from the community that funding alone is not sufficient to set up minority researchers for success. So this was the genesis of the Minority Mentorship and Training Program, and it's being spearheaded by my colleague, Dr. Eugene Manley Jr., and he's put together a phenomenal program. And as I mentioned in the title, it has two components, a mentorship component and a training component. So the training is very, very focused on providing our underrepresented scientists the ability to write a good grant, to write an NIH-style grant that they can then apply for funding for. And this is something we heard unanimously again from junior investigators, that they don't have the training required to write grants. They don't have the training required to put a statistical analysis plan together, right? And these are really important fundamental pieces, right? When you're thinking of junior faculty members who are stepping into the world of academia. So the training program has been created again with leaders in the space who are providing lectures and presentations to our trainees to develop grantsmanship skills. Now let's talk a little bit about the mentorship component. Again, grantsmanship is important, but the mentorship component is, again, providing that wraparound support to our trainees so that they can navigate their careers in thoracic oncology successfully. Now, what do I mean by mentorship? Again, Dr. Mandy Jr. put together a phenomenal panel of mentors, junior mentors, senior mentors, mentors who are from academia, mentors who are from outside of academia, from pharmaceutical companies, from the FDA, from policy shops. And the reason why we've put together mentors from these diverse backgrounds is, again, essentially to make sure that we are exposing our trainees to different careers in thoracic oncology, again, because we feel that we need diverse minds and diverse spaces. Now, the other piece of mentoring that we're looking at is also equipping our trainees with the ability to navigate their careers. And what do I mean by navigating their careers? Making sure that they are putting together a very, very tight job application packet, making sure that they have the skills to put together a mentorship program. How do you ace a job interview? How do you ace an academic job interview? And the other piece in the mentoring program is also sort of giving them the skills to navigate the realities of minority scientists, such as navigating racism, microaggressions. And I think these are all very, very important pieces. So again, when I unpack this, I look at our research awards as the financial side and our mentorship and training program as the wraparound support, essentially making sure that we are really setting up these junior investigators, these minority scientists for success as they navigate thoracic oncology.
This is incredibly important work, Dr. Roy. I think building out these fundamental foundational elements to increasing overall access across multiple populations is going to be critical. I mean, ultimately, bringing these types of future researchers into the mix is going to really drive significant increases in new therapeutics and treatment options for patients. Specifically, lung cancer is one of those diseases with the most approved targeted therapies within the FDA. Sounds like much of your work is looking to try to bolster those research activities. Can you help our listeners understand why these therapies have become more common in lung cancer specifically?
So targeted therapies have been a game changer for the lung cancer space. And I still remember when I was in graduate school in 2003, there was this big excitement in the research community because mutations in the EGFR gene in lung cancer were discovered. Now, before 2003, the mutations that we knew about in lung cancer were just in the KRAS gene. So in 2003, huge excitement. And then there was this drug that could actually very specifically target mutations in the EGFR gene. So we're not talking about non-specific drugs that attack cancer cells like chemotherapy. We are talking about very, very specific drugs that can actually hone into a very specific biomarker in a lung cancer cell and target that particular biomarker. Now, what do I mean by a biomarker? Biomarkers are very specific characteristics, or I would say unique characteristics of cancer cells that give cancer cells the ability to grow, the ability to escape the immune system. And through targeted therapies, we have the ability to block these biomarkers, again, making sure that we block the growth of cancer cells. Now, how do we detect biomarkers? We can detect biomarkers through tests called biomarker testing, either in the patient's tumor sample. And what do I mean by patient's tumor sample? A piece of tumor tissue that we can recoup during a biopsy, or we can look for biomarkers in blood samples from a patient. Now, it's incredibly important to keep in mind that biomarker testing, again, is not one test. We can have different types of biomarker tests. And the key thing to keep in mind is we are always going to look for biomarker tests that capture the most number of biomarkers, or comprehensive biomarker testing. Now, what do I mean by comprehensive biomarker testing? So I'll give you a little bit more of context. Right now in lung cancer, we have 10 different biomarkers to which we have FDA approved drugs. So that means either we can have 10 different tests to capture these biomarkers, or we can have one test that captures all these 10 biomarkers. And a comprehensive biomarker testing platform is one that captures all 10 biomarkers in one test. And that's what I mean by comprehensive biomarker testing. And that's typically done through something called a next generation sequencing test, or often referred to as NGS. So an NGS can help us identify these drivers that drive cancer cell growth. And after these biomarkers are identified in a patient's tumor sample or in a blood sample, then we can match that biomarker to that appropriate targeted therapy. The other piece, Jeff, to keep in mind is that it's not just about matching the biomarker to the targeted therapy. We now have very good evidence that patients who get matched to that right treatment, they have much better outcomes, both in terms of quantity of life and also quality of life. And I think that's incredibly important to keep in mind that right now we should not be just pushing for quantity, but also quality of life. And targeted therapies have been a game changer because they've been able to provide both quantity as well as quality. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is biomarker testing, or I would say comprehensive biomarker testing. It's not just about biomarkers to which we have FDA approved targeted therapies. The science is exploding at a phenomenal rate, Jeff, and we are discovering new biomarkers every day. We are discovering new drugs for these new biomarkers every day. So comprehensive biomarker testing not only helps us match a patient to the right treatment that's approved today, but it can also help us match patients to future clinical trials in development. And that's incredibly important as well, because we also know that clinical trials are no longer that last Hail Mary option. Clinical trials are often the first option given to a patient diagnosed with lung cancer. And that's why comprehensive biomarker testing is incredibly, incredibly important, because of the fact that it helps patients get matched to the right targeted therapy and also immunotherapy, because some immunotherapies are biomarker driven, but also get matched to a clinical trial that may be the best treatment option for a particular patient.
This is terrific. And it sounds like it goes quite hand in hand with the health equity and inclusiveness aspect, where you're trying to have more patients receive these clinical trials across multiple populations. But I think what you've keyed in on is that education is absolutely key to all of these aspects. And it sounds like this is what your No One Missed campaign is really about, making sure patients who are eligible for these targeted therapies or clinical trials receive the testing needed to identify these biomarkers. So can you tell us a little bit more about this campaign, No One Missed?
Very, very good question, Jeff. And why do we even have a campaign called No One Missed? Now, as a scientist, I focus on the science and the innovation, but as a patient advocate, I focus on access, because I think we need to keep in mind that science is a public good, innovation is a public good, and we as a patient advocacy group, we need to make sure that the science that we fund today reaches patients tomorrow. And biomarker testing, targeted therapies are a huge piece of the treatment arsenal of lung cancer. And we as a foundation, we are committed to making sure that these innovative approaches reach patients no matter where they're diagnosed, no matter their gender, sexual orientation, their race and ethnicity, where they live, and their socioeconomic status. And the No One Missed campaign is an inclusive campaign. And as the name suggests, it's a very simple message, by the way. No patient diagnosed with non-small cell lung cancer, a type of, the biggest subtype of lung cancer, should be missed when considering treatment options for lung cancer. And when I say should not be missed for treatment options for lung cancer, should not be missed for biomarker testing, because we know that biomarker testing is that first step to getting patients to that targeted therapy. So no patient should be left behind in biomarker testing and targeted therapy. So the principle again is very similar. It's very simple. No patient should be missed out when we're thinking of precision medicine, right? Because that's sort of the fundamental treating approach in lung cancer right now, precision medicine. So No One Missed campaign is very focused on making sure that patients are not left out in precision medicine. Now, the founding principle of the campaign is on strategic partnerships, because we know that precision medicine is not owned by LUNGevity. It's owned by all of us. It's owned by the entire healthcare ecosystem. So the fundamental principle is partnerships. We partner with partners such as yourself, diagnostic companies, pharmaceutical companies, doctors, healthcare systems, other patient advocacy group, for the simple reason that the message needs to be unified and the message needs to reach every person in the United States, every person in this world. Now, what do I mean by every person? And that goes back to the key features of the campaign. It is really for everyone. It is for those diagnosed with lung cancer to make sure that they're aware of biomarker testing. It is for those caring for someone who's been diagnosed with lung cancer so that they can inform their loved one about biomarker testing and make sure that biomarker testing does happen. It's for healthcare providers so that they are aware to make sure that they have those proactive discussions with their patients about biomarker testing, and also make sure that their patients do receive biomarker testing. for regulators, for policymakers, and of course also for the general public, because as we know, lung cancer is one of the most common cancers. So there might be someone in the general public who knows someone else who's been diagnosed with lung cancer and can actually also inform them about biomarker testing. So it's an all-inclusive campaign. Now, the campaign is focused on digital media. So we have a campaign website, and you can download resources from them, patient resources. Now, we just launched the complementary HCP-facing campaign website. So we have a patient-facing website and an HCP-facing website. And that's the digital media. Then we have social media. So we have a lot of activity on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And then finally, we also have mainstream media. So that's targeted national and local media reach. And you'll ask me, why do you have digital, social, mainstream? It's important to keep in mind that all of these different constituents that we talked about, patients, caregivers, doctors, general public, they all learn through different mechanisms. And that's why even through our channels of communication, we've tried to be all inclusive. So we make sure that we reach everyone wherever they are. Now, the broad campaign was launched a year ago, and we're in the second year of the campaign. And the campaign's been immensely successful. And now in the second year, we've started doing more targeted messaging. And what do I mean by targeted messaging? Targeted messaging to certain underrepresented communities who've been traditionally left behind in precision medicine. And we're starting with the African American community, and we've honed into the Atlanta area. Specifically, again, it's targeted, high population of African American patients. And we are working with influencers. And what do I mean by influencers? Patients and healthcare providers who are going to promote the message of biomarker testing, precision medicine. And we're also working with local partnerships, such as the HEAL Collaborative, a nonprofit who serves the African American community. And we're also working with national organizations who serve the Black community, such as blackdoctors.org. We recently actually had a Facebook Live with blackdoctor.org, where we had an African American patient, Laverne McDonald, Dr. Ray Ozaro-Gibbon, and Angela James, who was our in-house social worker, the three of them doing a Facebook Live with blackdoctors.org, which was a hugely successful Facebook Live activity. And again, making sure that we are very deliberately reaching members of the African American, members of the Black community, because again, as we talked about earlier on in the discussion, patients always gravitate towards people who look like them.
Well, this is very, very compelling story here, Dr. Roy. I mean, this goes hand in hand with some of the work that we're doing at Thermo Fisher to try to open up access to advanced biomarker testing to bring that access closer to the patients, even those that may reside outside of academic or outside of metropolitan areas serviced by academic medical centers. But I think we still understand that there are many barriers that still exist, restricting eligible patients to be tested. How can we collectively address some of these remaining hurdles?
Thank you, Jeff, for that question. And you used the word collective. And I think that's incredibly important to keep in mind, because again, biomarker testing, the burden of biomarker testing is really on all of us collectively and not on the patient. And given the fact that it's a multi-stakeholder problem, we need a multi-stakeholder solution. That's essentially what's been LUNGevity's solution as well. So our precision medicine initiative, a key piece of that is again bringing all the stakeholders together, right from the interventional radiologist or the pulmonologist who is acquiring tissue for biomarker testing, to the pathologist who is selecting the test for biomarker testing, making sure that it's a molecular pathologist who is choosing the appropriate comprehensive biomarker testing platform, to the oncologist, making sure that the oncologist understands the test report, recommends treatment options based on results of the biomarker testing report, to the policymakers and the regulators who are approving these tests, these drugs, all the way through to the payers who are reimbursing the test and the drug. So our precision medicine initiative has taken this all-inclusive approach as well, bringing together all these stakeholders to make sure that we use a systematic and deliberate approach to tackle this very, very complex problem called biomarker testing, precision medicine. Again, making sure that we make sure that every patient gets access to these life-saving therapies. And the other thing also to keep in mind is, given the fact that we know that disparities exist, we need to be very deliberate in our approach, making sure that our messaging is also inclusive, our messaging is also very focused. And you brought up a very good point, Jeff, about patients who are not treated in academic centers, patients are not treated in urban centers. Now, there is this rural-urban divide, right? Again, making sure that those oncologists who are serving patients in rural centers, oncologists are working in small community clinics, how can we support them? Again, we can support them by making sure that we equip them with the tools about biomarker testing to have those conversations with their patients.
Yeah, and again, I think this all goes back to education, trying to educate not just the physicians, but also the patients that they serve. But you made the comment that this is very complex. And so I'm curious how this campaign and LUNGevity in general are able to convey such a complex topic to patients rather than overwhelming them or confusing them, maybe even steering them clear from what they really need, which is comprehensive profiling for biomarkers.
And along with patients, I'm going to add HCPs as well, because I think we do need to educate the doctors, the healthcare providers, the healthcare ecosystem, because the burden of biomarker education should not just rest on the shoulders of patients. Again, someone who's received this devastating diagnosis of lung cancer, they should not always have to champion for biomarker testing. So I think the burden should rest on the rest of us as well. But having said that, given the fact that biomarker testing, precision medicine, is such a complex topic, how do we make it accessible to patients? How do we make sure that they're able to integrate that knowledge into their treatment journey, into their decision-making process? I would have two suggestions: make it as accessible as possible and make it health literate. Now, we've taken, again, a very deliberate approach with the campaign, and where we've broken down this very complex information into sort of snack-sized pieces and also full meal versions, because we do know that there's some patients who don't want all the information at the same time. They want it in bite-sized chunks throughout their journey. And there may be other patients or caregivers who want all that information at the same time so they can sort of see what the landscape looks like. And then there's some patients who may not want any information at all, right? They might just want the very basics. So to sort of cater to this very, very diverse spectrum of patients, we've deliberately created a campaign website and campaign materials that sort of address all of these needs. And again, I mentioned earlier on that we have that complimentary HCP website that we just launched, materials for healthcare providers, and primary, again, healthcare providers serving patients in community cancer centers and rural cancer centers, again, to sort of complement the patient education side of things so that the messaging that people are getting is uniform. Again, to your point, we need to get the right message out. And by right, I mean a uniform, consistent message. And that's what all our education is about as well, making sure that our messaging, our education is consistent, accurate, up to date, and patient-centric.
Terrific, Dr. Roy. And really, thank you for sharing this incredibly inspiring work that you, alongside your colleagues at LUNGevity, are doing to support research activities, increasing patient access for those who are affected by non-small cell lung carcinoma. For listeners interested in learning more about LUNGevity's latest campaigns and supporting their very impressive work, please visit noonemissed.com. Well, this is a wrap for our mini-series focused on oncology. I truly enjoyed being your host to bring a spotlight to some of the most important work being done as we look to accelerate science. Thank you to Dr. Roy and LUNGevity for joining us today and their ongoing partnership as we look to ensure no patient with lung cancer is left behind. Until next time, this is Science with a Twist.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Science with a Twist. This show is brought to you by Thermo Fisher Scientific, the world leader in serving science. If you enjoyed this episode, then follow Science with a Twist wherever you get your favorite podcasts.